Hey guys, what's going on? Brandon and Vanessa here with our first video about our the book we're reading, The Emotionally Healthy Leader. And we're going to go through chapter 1. And again, not an outline, but this is going to be, we're going to kind of go through our insights, what stuck out to us, and we're just going to have an open conversation. So I hope you guys enjoy.
So we read through the introduction and through chapter 1. So Brandon has, so the reality of it is I didn't get to read all of chapter 1, and our previous video I had mentioned that I'm on staff at a church and I'm the worship director, and this week is my turn to lead worship. And so my free time this week has just been working on the set, working on music, and so I didn't get a whole lot of time to read. So I'm going to have him share, because what I really liked is, he got to highlight his book, and I didn't get to do that, which I normally love to do that, but I didn't get to do that. So I'm going to have him highlight and share, and then we're just going to go bounce back and forth and have a real-time conversation, because we haven't really had a chance to fully go and talk about all this stuff as we're having the revelations of it. So...
But full disclosure, she doesn't like the way that I highlight because it's too messy. It's not perfect.
I just said I don't want to share a book with you.
Mm-hmm. So the author talks about, now he's been in ministry for a very long time, and he's been on a journey, but he talks about he's had 3 different conversions, or four different conversions.
So before you do that, just talk to him like, okay, so about how you got into the book. I pulled you into the book, but then... something happened.
Yeah. So you said, hey, we need to read this book, and I'm like, okay, great. No. A few weeks later, we need to read this book. All right, we will. And then finally, the third time, it's like, no, we're reading this book. I said, all right, let me get into it. So I wasn't really bought in. I'm like, okay, great. Like, do a Sabbath, become emotionally healthy. I'm emotionally healthy. I'm fine. But I have had bouts and bouts of health issues. Everything from 2 different types of walking pneumonia at the same time, to mycotoxins in my body that I had to get rid of, to a broken down immune system, to now a peptic ulcer that I'm dealing with. And some of that may possibly be some emotions that might not have fully developed yet.
Stress related,
and stress related, perhaps. And so we're working through this together. And so what really got me invested into this book was the author talking about, he's had 4 different conversions in his life. The first conversion was going from like someone who doesn't believe in God to like a spiritual leader, right? And that's everyone's walk, I feel like, in one way, shape, or form. When they get saved, they get excited about Jesus. And then the second one he talks about is going from emotional blindness to emotional health. So a process of learning how to be healthy emotionally, which has been his whole life that he's worked on it. But where I'm at is his third conversion of his process, because I found some parallels for me. And the third one is going from busy activity to slowed down spirituality. And that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But what I'm realizing is I am an intense person that sets intense goals, and I go for things. And so sometimes I get into these crazy, busy times where everything is an emergency, which is not true. But I feel like everything's an emergency, and I have these goals that I set, but I also have these unrealistic expectations of perfection in those goals. And so I need to slow down, and my body has actually forced me to slow down at times, and my body's telling me something, and I haven't been listening. And so I have a relationship with Jesus, and I love the Lord, but I'm realizing I need to slow down and spend more time with Him so that I can heal. So there's healing in my body that needs to happen. So. Yeah. That's kind of, and the way that he describes it is an iceberg. Like you have a small amount of the iceberg out of the water, and then the big portion, 3/4 of the iceberg is underneath the water. If an iceberg, imagine a huge iceberg melting. And so you need to deal with all that stuff that's underneath the water, right? And that's kind of where I'm at. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What you got? No? That's any? All right. So as we jump into chapter 1, I think where I kind of I first pulled me in as far as the chapter is he talks about 4 characteristics of an emotionally unhealthy leader, and the first one resonated with me is having low self-awareness. So when I look at my emotions, and I basically talked a little bit about this, but it says that they ignore emotion-related messages their body may send. So fatigue, stress-induced illness, weight gain, ulcers, headaches, or depression. So they avoid reflecting on sadness or fear or anger. And there's been so many times where her and I are in a conversation and I just shut down. And I know that I'm shutting down.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm like,
know.
Where'd you go?
Yeah, I'm gone. There's a wall that goes up, which is probably a lot of men. But for me, I tend to shut down. And so I realized, okay, I know that about myself. I thought that I dealt with my emotions, but I haven't been fully expressing all my emotions. Maybe I'm just cherry picking the ones I want to deal with. So that was something for me that he goes on to say that they struggle to articulate the reasons for their emotional triggers, and I'm like, yeah, I can't quite pinpoint it why I get that way, and so that stuck out for me big time.
Yeah, I think just some insight on us, like we have in the last 7 years or so been going through emotional awareness because we both kind of locked up our emotions, so we don't easily identify. And so 7 years ago, I started reading this book and realized that I avoid all emotion at all cost. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not healthy. So I started that journey of really, and it started with a list of emotions, of just looking at the list and being like, what am I feeling right now? Other than anger, because anger, what I learned, is really just a blanket for real raw emotion. And so just identifying that and working through that process, and he has been so patient, and now I will be patient as he walks through it as well. So like just walking through that process, it's messy, it's not fun. However, we know that it's required, like in order to grow and be healthy, and not just for yourselves, but for your marriage and for your family. So it's really good.
I'm sure that a lot of you are thinking like, well, why would you like broadcast this? We have done a lot of work. This isn't the first book we've read. We've done tons and tons of emotional work. We even are part of a ministry that travels across the world and does some amazing things. So we've done work in this, but there's a level of work that we haven't done. And we believe that this book is going to tip the scales.
It's another step. So we're always growing, we're always changing, and we have to continue to pursue growth forward. And this is just another step that we feel like, okay, this is relevant, this is important. I know I got drawn to this book just because of the feeling like something was coming and we had to be prepared. In other words, if we didn't know how to rest in the season that's coming ahead of busyness and things, then we could crack. Especially because of our tendencies to basically be workaholics. It's so easy for us to do and just pour everything into work, everything into achievement, and not slow down and rest. And we have a marriage to think about, and we have 4 kids to think about, so it's really important.
And people always ask us too, like, how do you do it all? Like, you have 4 kids. How do you have a successful business? How do you have a great marriage? How do you, like, all these things? And a lot of that is, I mean, it goes towards our I guess, strengths and weaknesses. We do keep ourselves busy. And so in this season, this is something we're committing to spend our cracks of time in. So that kind of brings me to the next insight, was that an unemotional healthy leader, a leader that's not emotionally healthy, they lack a work Sabbath rhythm. And so that's something that we've talked about quite a bit and we've never fully implemented. I used to not work on Sundays at all. I still, for the most part, don't. I would say 99% of the time I don't work on Sundays. However, it's not just work. It's not what Sabbath is. And we're going to get more deeper into what that is. But think of a 24-hour period in which you rest and cease all work. And, we're not talking about like grocery shopping and all of those kind of things. Like, you're not going to fill that with other things.
So what do you think about when you think about implementing a Sabbath?
Yeah, when I think about implementing a Sabbath, I think of impossible. Like, I know that I want to do it. I know that it's a possibility, but when I say impossible, like, perfect Sabbath for me would be Sunday. Monday's a heavy work day in real estate. Saturday's a heavy work day, family day. So, like, those are, almost Sundays sandwiched in between, and naturally Sunday is a day I feel I can rest. So to take a full 24-hour period seems really, really hard. To take like a half a day seems more reasonable. Seems like I could do that. So I'm still battling it, but I know the importance of it. Yeah. You?
Same.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're similar in that it's like, how do you do that? And what the author talks about, there's one part where he says, if they practice Sabbath at all, they do inconsistently, believing they need to finish all their work or work hard enough to earn the right to rest. And
yeah, that one got me too. Because that's so true. Like, I mean, I'd even be like that with food. Like, okay, you can't eat lunch until you finish this project, or you finish folding the clothes, or you finish... It was like I had to earn to eat and earn to rest and earn a break. So that line right there, it was like, oh, I totally would have done that. Like, if I would have known, okay, Friday's my rest day, my Sabbath, then I'm going to have to work extra hard all week long to fit everything in and earn that rest. So it was kind of like a, like a gut check, So...
I mean, that happens all the time. It's like you work hard and you get to Friday and you're like, hey, I deserve this drink, or I deserve this dinner, or I'm, whatever it is.
I deserve to watch TV in bed.
Yep. You deserve all of that. So, not true. There is a really cool leadership, what would you call this?
They have quizzes.
Yeah, quizzes.
So, like, there's quizzes throughout the book. And this one... it kind of summarizes, like, 5 is, what is it? Like, always true, and 1 is never true of me. And so you take the little test. It's not very long. It's not very hard. But it kind of gives you a gauge of where you're at. And so we both, our ranges were like 2s and 3s, like, not very often and occasionally, and which basically said we had the emotional health of an adolescent.
In leadership.
So we're like,
we're children. And we thought we were doing pretty good. Like, we've led a lot of people in different aspects of our life. And we're like, okay.
Yeah, and being in that adolescent phase, it said that you're more concerned about doing than being. And you're most likely functioning, like at a level of an adolescent. So, like, this was kind of... I mean, it's good because it gave a good gauge of, like, where we're at, especially if pride ever tries to come in, like, oh, we've dealt for 7 years with emotions and we're good at, like, we know how to process emotion, or at least I could feel that way. But to see it laid out like that and go, oh my gosh, okay, no, that's good. That's good. We need to work on things. So it was a really good indicator, and that it's right up front too, like right up front, chapter 1, like, boom, just punch in the gut.
There's a lot of things that hit me in the gut on this chapter, but let's just be real. So he has some unhealthy commandments he does in the book, and so we're just going to cover some of the ones that stuck out to us. It's not a success unless it's bigger and better. Most of us have been taught to measure success by external markers.
Absolutely.
Numerical growth is what the world equates with power and significance. It is an absolute value. Bigger is always better.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that hit me was like, okay, when you are stuck in the bigger is better mindset, what is the question you can ask yourself to kind of snap you out of it and put you in the right direction? And it was, am I casting vision of growth from my own ambitions or from the mouth of the Lord? And that to me was like, wow, that's such a good indicator of like, okay, when we're business planning or when we're vision casting, like just for our family or church or whatever it is, like to slow down enough and say, okay, we're pretty ambitious people. We've established that. Is this coming out of like, okay, well, we need to triple our income. Okay, why? Like, where's that coming from? And I think that even in business planning and the years that we've been in real estate, like there's definitely that comes into play where it's like, wow, we helped 50 families. Next year, let's do 100. And then we push and we strive to do this new goal of 100, help 100 families. And it's like, okay, but where did that come from? So I think it's really cool to have this specifically worded question to really come back to moving forward.
Yeah, and really getting the bottom of what's important, like legitimately figuring out those questions that we can ask, so that we can make sure that we're in step with the Lord, because that's what we want. We want His will in our life. He goes on to say, joy comes from their relationship with the Lord, not their achievements for Him. And I laughed. And I highlighted that just because we're achievers at heart. And we know this, right? We've done lots of studies on identity and all these things. Just because you know something doesn't mean you're applying it in your life. And so sometimes, even though you know something, you have to be reminded of it. And more often than you would think, because even I, as of right now, am in a place where I want to like run. I'm in that mindset of, wow, the Lord gave me this vision, and for 30 days I was getting words, I was journaling, I was having dreams, I was seeing all these things about our future, which is amazing. And I said, okay, I'm gonna make this happen. And so when I have that kind of mindset, it's almost like, okay, Lord, thanks for giving me this. I'll take it from here. And I put him in the back seat, and I'm like, I'm gonna drive the car, which is not the way to do it. It's not the way to succeed.
Well, that's always fun, because as your wife, I see it, and then I'm like praying, like show him.
Yeah,
But that was cool, because I actually highlighted the same thing. Like that stuck out to me too. I wrote down Luke 10:20, because that was. Are you still there? Because that was this scripture, because it always kind of got me. Like he sent out the disciples. Jesus did. They came back and they were like, oh my gosh, we delivered this guy. The demons even listened to us and all this. And then Jesus says something that kind of always like hit me like, man, that's such a rough rebuke. Like, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And I was like, yeah, but didn't you tell them to go do those things? Like, I don't understand. Like, so we celebrate that there's freedom and all that stuff. But how the author worded this was like, he said this to make it clear that your joy doesn't come from the works, but your joy comes from the relationship with Him. So thank the Lord that you have done what you did for me so that I can give, right? Freely you have received, freely you should give. And so it just was like this banner of like relationship over works. And we're work heavy people,
which is a book in itself. I mean, I can't even tell you how many years I focused on works, and that was my identity. Works, approval, success, money, all of that was put in God's place, and really understanding that the Lord loves me regardless of what I have done, will do, for Him or for His kingdom. And I always, whenever I'm discipling anyone else, I always talk about Jesus when He was baptized, and He comes out of the water by John the Baptist. He comes out of the water, and God says, "This is my Son, who I'm well pleased." And that was before He did any miracles, right? And so I always go back to that, and that's kind of a really good reset for me. Whenever I feel like I'm in that spot, I start to think about that, like, I can play it in my head and say, like, He's pleased with me. He loves me. I'm a son. I'm going to focus on being with Him instead of doing something that I think I should do, or that I want to do.
Yeah, that's good.
So another one was an unhealthy commitment too. What you do is more important than who you are. We covered that a little bit just in talking about identity.
The doing over being.
Right.
Yeah.
And so being a son versus doing things to earn the approval of the Father, I mean, that's specific identity right there. There we go. I'm like, got to make sure it's still working. So I want to, like, being with God is way more important than doing things for God. And I can say that in my own time with him, some of the biggest revelations I've gotten, or things that he showed me, dreams that I've had, visions that I've seen, that's so much longer lasting and more impactful than praying for someone and seeing them get healed or ministering to people, for me personally. Mm-hmm. So it's the time for me.
Yeah. I thought this was really good in, he said some internal signs you're doing more than being. And that was a lack of peace, irritability, or rushing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like the irritability and the rushing, like that happens to me so often with the kids or like whatever else, work or whatever. And it's like I find myself rushing to get places and irritable and just, everything kind of sets me off. And it's things like this throughout while I was listening to the book of just like, oh my gosh, this isn't the mom I want to be. This isn't the person I want to be. This isn't the leader I want to be. This isn't the wife I want to be. When I was confronted with these things of like, I don't want to be irritable. Like, I wish I could be more peaceful. I wish I could carry more peace for my kids to drink from, like, I think that's was so hard in hearing some of this stuff. Like, that's a sign that you need rest, that I need rest. And so he just said, like, hey, if you're doing more than being, then make it a priority to seek his face, like, first of every day. You're seeking his face and his will. So you're asking the Lord, like, what does my day look like today? What do you want me to focus on? And you had just done this Monday, right? Where it was like, that was kind of your first moment of doing that. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. As I was reading this and I had work to do and it's Monday and a lot of stuff, and I just really felt like I was prompted to just take the day off, which I never do. And when I say take the day off, I mean, we went shopping and we did stuff. But I spent the day with the family. We went to the park after the kids got out of school and just really, really just decided to spend the time with them. And there was a lot of opposition at first, but eventually, I mean, I didn't even have my phone, which is never the case.
Yeah, I think at one point I saw he was downstairs and his phone was on the bed upstairs, and I was like, oh no, did he forget it? No, he doesn't forget it. He must have left it here on purpose.
Yeah, it's almost a must at this point to try to make sure that I'm present, where I'm at, because whenever you're an entrepreneur, you get phone calls, they could be deals, and that's just the nature of it. So trying to let that stuff go is important. I think one of the things that hit me the most was actually the unhealthy commitment number 3. Superficial spirituality is okay. That's what unhealthy leaders believe. And I mean, I was like, no, like my relationship with the Lord's good. I mean, it's crazy when you think about your relationship with the Lord, and then you also think about what you've done in ministry and what you've accomplished and how you've discipled people and led people. And let's face it, everybody is in a different space. Like there's the mentors and the people that are discipling you. There's the people you're living life with and the people that you're discipling and pulling up. But it changes. So just because you were discipling someone for a season and you were like really, really in tune your relationship with God, that doesn't mean that the next season or the next year or whatever, that's going to be the same way. So what got me is he said, I asked leaders to tell me about how they are cultivating their relationship with God. I asked questions like, describe to me your rhythm, how you study scripture apart from preparations, when and how much time you spend alone with God. I ask them how they structure their time with God and what they do. The more I ask those questions of pastors and Christian leaders around the world, the more alarmed I've become. Most leaders don't have good answers. And yes, this guy's a pastor and a leader for 26 years. But this isn't the type of book that's all it is. I mean, this is for all the leaders. I'm seeing how it reflects like my life. There are definitely parallels. And when I really sat down and wrote down like what it looks like, I'm like, wow, I'm disappointed, and then I thought that my rhythms and relationships on how I connected with the Lord, I thought that it was different in my mind. And when I was forced to write it down, I couldn't imagine if someone asked me how I would feel like if I was in front of someone.
Yeah,
used to have time
like,
to
hey,
reflect.
so how much do you read the Word?
Yeah, because I'm like the opposite. There's people that really live by the law that are like, I have my quiet time for an hour every morning, and I have this, and I do this, and I read my Bible every day. And I'm just like, I read my Bible when I feel prompted. I read my Bible when I need some insight, or I want to speak with the Lord in a new way. Like normally, my time with the Lord is just like having conversations and worshiping, for the most part. So it was kind of that eye-opening thing that, wow, like, have I become lukewarm, or have I, like, is it just mediocre? Like, is that okay? It's like almost feels superficial in a time, which is not normally the case, but that's what it feels right now.
Yeah. I think when I was reading this book, that's something that I shifted is that I listened to that part, and I'm like, that's so true. And so that's when I started reading every day, whether it was night or morning. And Psalm 139 has been like the ongoing daily thing of just search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and see if there's any anxious way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. So, but it's true. Like there is a different level of intimacy when you are in His Word. And I think that is what we talked about at one point, is just seeing that, when you're looking at those questions of Him, like describing how you study Scripture apart from preparations. In other words, there's no purpose to it other than relationship, other than to how do you learn more about your Father. And that's where, I know we were both convicted, so
there you go. So he goes on to talk about the 5-stage process of how we learn and change, and we're really going through this and really realizing what the last 7 years have been. We say 7 years because that's when I've been dealing with the health issues. Pretty serious, like put me in bed a good portion of that. And so having to say, man, I only have so much energy. I have an hour or two of energy, and I have to figure out where to put that. And I have to be on during that time, to be able to get done what I need to get done. So, and her taking the brunt of all the rest of the work and the kids and everything else. So it's been really challenging. But, the first step is awareness. Slowing down is an interesting idea. So the awareness, of course, started when I was on my back, of like, man, I can't think my way out of this. I can't do my way out of this. I can't work my way out of this. My body literally shut down.
What's funny though is like, okay, that happened, but it wasn't an interesting idea. No. Like you were forced to, and you fought it every single second you could.
I did.
Where I'm like, can you please stop? Like, stop.
Mm-hmm.
And that was near impossible. So like slowing down is an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
And I think that I didn't even have that awareness till actually listening to the book. And then, because at first it was like, oh, leadership. Yes, I want to grow in that because I love leadership and I love growing and I love learning new things. And there's a purpose for this. And, like that was the intent, right? But I think for me, I didn't get awareness of like, wow, that sounds like an interesting idea until like the beginning of this book where he's like, what does healthy emotionally healthy leadership look like? And then he's saying things like taking time for solitude, taking time for Sabbath, pouring into your marriage, like being intentional with time. And it was like, oh yeah, I guess rest is pretty important. And I had received actually a couple prophetic words leading up to this book too, of just like, this one word that was given to me that is super visual that I really appreciated was, I just saw you standing out under the snow and you were enjoying each little snowflake like dropping on your face. Did I tell you this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Dropping on your face, and then it started snowing pretty heavy. And the more snow accumulates, the heavier it gets. So at one point you're enjoying the snowflakes, but at another it's starting to get really heavy and you're getting buried in the snow. And he was like, I feel like the Lord's telling you that it's okay to take shelter. And I was like, what? No, I don't feel rushed. I don't feel overwhelmed or burdened or anything. I'm spinning all these things. It's fine. Like I have 4 kids and doing all the things, and Brandon has another health issue happening, but it's fine. This is life. It's, it's great. And,
everything's fine.
But it was this reality moment of really checking in with myself and being like, okay, Lord, I know you're calling me to rest, but I truly don't know how. And that was real. It was like reading this book, and there was a moment where they're like, what do you find delight in? How do you rest? And I had no idea.
Yeah.
So then I went to ponder, help me understand more about slowing down. And that's what really carried me through the whole book, because I'm like, okay, I'm interested in doing this. I know I'm supposed to. I don't understand. And so I then, by the time I got to value, like I really believe it's important for us to slow down as a family. I think when I got to that point, that's when I finally told him, like, okay, I don't normally say this, but we have to do this book. Like I never tell you things very like, what do you call that? Like very,
like forward in the way that's like, it's this way.
Like non-negotiable.
Yeah, non-negotiable.
Like
that one.
I never say things like that, like black and white, like it's either this or nothing. And it wasn't an ultimatum, but it was like, I'm putting my foot down. We have to do this book. Because it finally got to that place of where I valued the idea of rest, where I'm seeing how incredibly important it is, not just for us, but we're raising 4 men. And the idea that if we're able to demonstrate and have them experience what rest looks like that's transformative in their lives.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want them to follow our path. Yes, I want our boys to be driven and, not lazy, but at the same time, like, I want them to understand how important they are, that they are worth to be, that they're worthy of rest, that they don't have to strive through life, but that they can really choose themselves first and rest and take that time to really care for themselves instead of pushing ourselves aside for achievement or work or whatever it is,
Yeah.
So it looks like we have 2 more stages that we're not there yet, I believe. Well, at least for me. Prioritizing, which I'm shifting my entire...
we didn't do value.
Value, that's where I'm saying I am right now.
Oh, okay.
Because I told you the
You
ultimatum.
believe it's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I really believe it is important for everybody to slow down. So I said, we're doing this. Prioritize. I'm shifting my entire life around as I slow down to be with Jesus. And that still seems so incredibly hard even. So like, how? We still don't know that. And that's part of the journey of this book. Like, as we're reading this book, is having these conversations. Because like you said, I'm like all in 24-hour shutdown. And he's like, let's start with an evening. And so even just like working through this as not just an individual, not just me, not even just a marriage, but we have a whole family of 6 of us to have incorporated in this idea. So like, how does this work? So there is, and it's, what's funny is he shows this graph that shows this big old gap. So show him that graph. gap. So can you see that? So like, yeah, you go from, 1 to 2 to 3, and I value, and I got right here and I was like, hey, we need to do this thing. Look at this huge gap in between valuing and prioritizing. The action behavioral gap. And that's like where we're at. Like, how is this even possible when the kids are in sports and we have all the school events, we have all the holidays coming up, we have all the birthday parties? Like,
Yeah,
how is that
you
possible?
work on Sundays.
Yeah, he takes his day off on Sundays. I work on Sundays.
Like,
so
you
it's
can't
like,
have 2 separate Sabbaths if you're married. Like, you can't.
just no. There seems like it defeats the purpose. So I don't know.
If you're currently doing a Sabbath, what's your rhythm? Put it in the comments.
Please.
I'd really be curious to hear. So we're working through that. We're working through that right now. Remember that time we were like child leaders because we scored 2s and 3s?
Yeah, we're like adolescents. We're teenagers.
Yeah, we're teenagers.
Yeah.
It's fine. So in his like final thoughts, I really liked some of the graphs he's using. Not graphs. Oh my gosh.
Images,
demonstrations, graphics.
Maybe you're thinking
using.
graphics. That other one was a graph, though.
He talks about foundation, and he talks about in New York City how much money and time they spend on foundation, how important it is when you have skyscrapers that are super tall. And he just says, the foundation is your inner life. The quality and durability of the building, the team or organization you lead will be determined by how carefully this foundation is laid. And that's just such a good parallel for anything you build, whether it's a family, marriage, business. The foundation is everything. And he talks a lot about, in this chapter about your shadow, about finding your shadow. And we'll probably get into that more later. But lasting change in churches and organizations require men and women committed to leading from a deep and transformed inner life. And so I truly believe that, because the leader that I am now is 10x better than the leader I was 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. All of the emotional healing and what I've done, and a lot of what I do with our team, is actually really funny. We met for lunch with a newer agent that's talking about joining our team, and we're talking, and Vanessa talks about the culture of our team, and I'm like, I guess I never really thought about that. And she just says, like, the culture of our team is like family. We are focused on improving and growing and getting better, because who we become is going to help our business grow, not just learning this tactic, So it was like, it's so true, So if we fail to recognize that who we are on the inside informs every aspect of our leadership, we will do damage to ourselves and those we lead. Mm.
There's so many of these that just like, just hit you hard.
Yeah.
And I think, like in part of this, he's talking about, okay, you lay the foundations of that skyscraper, and they go down like 20, sometimes 20, was it 25 feet? No, 25 stories below the surface. So they have to anchor these piles into rock, like bedrock of the earth. So they have to go down super far, build these things, and then you can distribute the weight of the skyscraper evenly on all these piles. So if it's not done properly, then you will start seeing cracks in the skyscraper, because it's tremendous weight. Mm-hmm. And so the whole idea is that foundation system of you needs to be solid. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the weight of carrying everybody or ministry or your job or your clients or your business, like family, all that weight is going to start cracking at some point. And so that was like a big whoa, like something has to shift.
And how would it start cracking? Like, what would be some of the examples? If the foundation started cracking, what would be the consequences of that?
Well, you'd probably start losing people off your team. Your business would start declining. Your marriage would start.
People would leave. Like,
your kids would stop spending time with you. Like, there's so many ways that
with your kids, you'd get divorce, or not a relationship with your wife, your spouse. That's huge.
Yeah, and nobody wants that.
Well, but people usually just, when I say people, most people just power through and they just keep doing the same patterns.
I
And
think
that's
because,
why the divorce comes up. And that's
right,
why
but
the
nobody
kids.
knows any different. And I think that's why this is so important,
Mm-hmm.
because the culture we're in pushes us to be busy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, you should be a wife that has three different side businesses, hustles, three side hustles while homeschooling your kids, and, like all these things. So, like, it's so hard for us to do anything different when we haven't seen it demonstrated. Like, that's why it seems so impossible. And nobody wants the divorce. Nobody wants like a non-relationship with their kids, for however you want to call it. But like, no one wants that. And yet it happens because we're too busy dividing and conquering, because our kids have so many activities that we have to in order to keep everything afloat, right? But
Yeah.
then, like it says, that foundation. So talk about there's four pillars or piles, right? Like there's four things of the foundational inner life.
Yeah. Yeah. He says to lead from a deep and transformed inner life, you must face your shadow.
And that shadow's like that thing that kind of drives you, right? Like the thing that drives you, and you're kind of unaware of how strong it is in your life, but like you might overreact to something, and it's actually your shadow working through you.
Yeah.
So that's how
Something
kind
that
of who
something that
words
typically
it.
happened from childhood, or something that
Yeah, he
like
says like between 8 and 12, like something
your
happened.
parents said or did or whatnot that developed this complex or this shadow. Facing your shadow. Lead out of your marriage or singleness. Slow down for loving union
With Jesus.
with Jesus, and practice Sabbath delight. So those are the foundations. So that's what we're going to start to go through in the next chapters, which is exciting and
I think
terrifying.
that's probably one of the ones that I think why we thought, oh, we're going to be so good at this. We're going to be super emotionally healthy, because we have faced a lot of our shadow. And that's just basically acknowledging like we are not perfect. We have some issues in our life that need to be addressed, and we address them on a regular basis, where you think, I've already addressed that, but then something comes up and you responded the same way. It's like those patterns you can't seem to get out of. And then you're like, I thought I already dealt with this. Nope, apparently not, because it's been ingrained in you since 8 to 12 years old. Since that, you've continued using that method to really defend yourself. It's like a protective mechanism that we develop, and we've spent a lot of time on that. But even still, like this, you can't have one foundation, like, pillar. You have to have several to maintain the weight of all life. So
Well, that's why we're here. I mean, we've done all this work and we still have struggles. Excuse me. So how is everyone else?
yes, you do. We do. Yes, we do.
We. Like, then how's everyone else? Like that's why we're so passionate and excited to go through this. And, if us going through this and just sharing our life helps one marriage, helps one family, then it's worth it. So we're going to continue to do this. Please, if you watch this video, just let us know if you gain any insights from it, or if you're planning on getting the book. We'd love to hear more from you, and we will be back next week for chapter 2.
Chapter 2.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.